A food delivery driver brings a takeout bag to a billionaire's penthouse at 3 a.m. The man who answers the door is not human. His tip isn't money, but a strange, glowing mark burned onto her wrist. A mark that makes her drop the bag, her phone, and every plan she had for the future. What she didn't know was that this delivery was the end of her life and the beginning of it. The rain was a cold, miserable sheet, blurring the neon lights of the city into watercolor streaks. It was 2:54 a.m., and Alara's knuckles were white on the steering wheel of her sputtering 2005 sedan. The wipers fought a losing battle. Thwack screech, thwack screech, a rhythm that matched the anxious hammering in her chest. This was her last delivery. One more, and she could go home, lock her 3 deadbolts, and pretend the world outside didn't exist. The order was strange from the start. A single item, a $120 artisan charcuterie board, from a restaurant that closed at midnight. The delivery address wasn't an address at all, just PH01 the Obsidian. The Obsidian was a needle of black glass and steel that pierced the skyline, a building so wealthy it didn't bother with street numbers. Alara had always felt invisible beneath it. Tonight, however, she felt something else. Watched. It was a feeling she knew too well, a prickle on her scalp that had haunted her for the last year, ever since she'd finally left him. She'd checked her rearview mirror 10 times on the way, but there was only the rain and the hollow echo of the empty streets. She told herself it was just the hour, just the exhaustion. Survival skills from past trauma, her therapist called it. Tonight, they just felt like paranoia. She pulled into the absurdly grand covered entrance. No doorman, just a polished obsidian panel. She held her app up, and with a hiss, the massive glass door slid open. The lobby was silent, vast, and cold. It smelled like ozone and expensive sterile marble. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for giants. The elevator was a silent, mirrored box that whisked her upward with stomach-dropping speed. Floor PH01. The doors opened not onto a hallway but directly into the apartment. No, not an apartment. A cavern. The room before her was 2 stories tall, walled entirely in glass. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing to illuminate a space devoid of anything. No furniture, no rugs, no art. Just acres of polished black floor reflecting the angry sky, and a single, massive, throne-like chair facing the windows. A man stood beside it, his back to her. He was tall, dressed in a simple black cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He didn't turn. "Leave it on the floor," a voice commanded. It didn't sound loud, yet it filled the entire space, resonating like a cello string. Alara's hands trembled. Right. Sign here, please." She fumbled for the receipt, her fingers numb. He turned, and the air left her lungs. He was beautiful in the way a predator is beautiful, sharp, defined, and utterly dangerous. His face was all severe angles and pale, flawless skin. His hair was dark, and his eyes were the color of ancient frozen amber. They didn't just look at her, they seemed to dissect her. He couldn't have been older than 30, yet he felt ancient. He moved without a sound, covering the distance between them in 2 silent strides. He moved like a shadow, a panther. He stopped inches from her. He was cold. She could feel the chill radiating from him, cutting through her damp jacket. He didn't look at the food. He didn't look at the receipt. He looked at her. His gaze dropped to her throat, where her pulse hammered visibly. He inhaled, a sharp, almost imperceptible intake of air. "You are afraid," he stated. Not a question. It's late," she stammered. "And the storm." His eyes narrowed. No, not the storm. He leaned closer, and the scent of ozone was stronger, mixed with something dusty, like old books and dried spices. "It's the scent on your jacket. Old fear." and knew. Someone is following you. Ice, sharp and sudden, shot through her veins. What? No, I'm just tired. You lie poorly, Alara. She froze. Her name wasn't on the order, only her delivery ID. How did you... You've been watched for 3 blocks. A man in a dark gray sedan. He is parked across the street now. He followed you here. Alara's blood ran cold. The paranoia. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. She wanted to bolt, to run to the elevator, but she was paralyzed by the intensity of his stare. He is not human, Alara, the man said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And he is hunting. I don't understand. He hunts those with unique blood. He sensed you. And now he waits. The man looked at the food bag in her hand, then back at her. You came here expecting a tip. I have to go. You cannot go home. You cannot go anywhere he can find you. He reached out, his long, pale fingers brushing her jaw. His touch was like winter frost. You are observant. You notice details. You've survived before, but you cannot survive this. He held out his hand. Your wrist. Confused and terrified, she held out her left arm. He took her wrist, his grip surprisingly gentle but firm as steel. With the thumb of his other hand, he pressed against her pulse point. A searing electric cold shot up her arm. It wasn't a burn. It was the opposite. Alara cried out and tried to pull away, but he held her fast. She looked down. Where his thumb pressed, a silver, intricate mark was appearing on her skin, glowing like moonlight captured under ice. It looked like a shield, or a stylized eye. What did you do to me? She gasped, dropping the food bag. The charcuterie board spilled across the pristine floor. A tip, he said. The glowing stopped, leaving a mark that looked like a fresh silver scar. It is a rune of concealment, a glamour. To him, you will now smell of ash and iron. He will not be able to track you by scent, but it will not last long, and it will not fool his eyes. He released her. Alara stumbled back, clutching her wrist. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What are you? My name is Cassian, and I am the one who ensures monsters like the one outside do not break the rules. He turned from her and walked back to the window, a silhouette against the flashing sky. Your stalker has broken the rules. He didn't turn back. He was dismissing her. But as she fumbled for the elevator button, his voice echoed in the cavernous room one last time. Do not go home, Alara. He will be waiting there. He pulled a slim black keycard from his pocket and tossed it. It skittered across the floor, stopping at her feet. Apartment 10B in this building. It is shielded. Go now. She grabbed the card. She looked at the rune on her wrist, at the spilled food, and at the imposing, terrifying man staring out at the storm. This was insane, a dream. But the icy thrum in her wrist was real. The feeling of being watched was real. She ran. Apartment 10B was on the ground floor, but it felt as secure as a bank vault. The instant the heavy door clicked shut, the sound of the city vanished. It was utterly silent. The apartment was the opposite of the penthouse. Small, warm, and fully furnished in a bland, comfortable corporate style. It was sterile, but it was safe. Alara locked the door, bolted it, and leaned against it, her entire body shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She looked at her wrist. The silver rune was bright, pulsing with a faint cold light. It didn't hurt. It just was. A tip. She crept to the window, her heart in her throat. The window was tinted, but she could see the street. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. And just as Cassian had said, a dark, gray sedan was parked across the road, half hidden in the shadow of an awning. As she watched, the driver's side door opened. a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a long, dark coat. He didn't look at her window. He looked up toward the penthouse. Even from this distance, she could feel the malice radiating from him. He seemed to be arguing with someone, gesturing angrily at the building. Then he stopped. He tilted his head, as if sniffing the air. He turned, his gaze sweeping the street. Ilara flinched back from the window, even though she knew he couldn't see her. He looked frustrated. He ran a hand through his hair, then kicked the tire of his car. He was searching for her scent, the scent Cassian had masked. The man got back in his car, slammed the door, and with a squeal of tires, sped off into the night. Ilara sank to the floor, the terror finally overwhelming her. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't paranoid. A man in a penthouse, a man who moved like smoke and had eyes of frozen amber, had just saved her life from another monster in the dark. She stared at the rune, the silver scar that now bound her to a world she never knew existed. She had survived an abusive ex who had tried to break her. She had built a life, however small, from the wreckage. She was a survivor. But this was new. She touched the keycard Cassian had given her. It was heavy, cold. She had a choice. She could run, or she could stay in the one building in the entire city that the monster in the gray sedan seemed to fear. The room was silent, safe, but she knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, the sun rose on a city washed clean. Ilara hadn't slept. She had sat in the armchair watching the door, watching the rune on her wrist fade from a bright silver glow to a faint scar-like shimmer. At precisely 9 a.m., there was a soft knock. Ilara jumped, her hand flying to the heavy lamp on the side table. "Who is it?" "My name is Julian. I am an associate of Lord Cassian. I have breakfast." The voice was calm, British, and polite. She hesitated, then slowly unbolted the door. The man outside was the antithesis of Cassian. Where Cassian was dark, imposing, and cold, Julian was normal. He was in his late 40s, with warm brown eyes, a slightly receding hairline, and a kind smile. He wore a tweed jacket and held a large paper bag that smelled miraculously of fresh coffee and pastries. "May I?" he asked gently. Ilara nodded, stepping aside. Julian entered and placed the bag on the small kitchen counter. "He thought you might appreciate something other than... Well, my apologies for last night's dinner." "He, Lord Cassian?" Ilara asked, her voice hoarse. "Indeed. He is not known for his hospitality. Please sit, eat." Julian poured 2 coffees. "We have much to discuss, and you have, I imagine, many questions." "Is he... What is he? What was that thing outside?" Ilara sat but didn't touch the coffee. Julian took a sip of his own. "Lord Cassian is what you would call a vampire, though the term is rather cinematic. He is the primus of this city, the king, as you might put it. He is responsible for the coven, the society of beings like him, who live unseen alongside your world. And the man outside? An aberration, a rogue, a vampire named Silas." Julian's kind eyes hardened. "Silas has broken the most ancient law of our kind. He hunts not for sustenance, but for genetic traits. He believes certain rare human bloodlines can grant him power, cure him of afflictions." Ilara looked at her own hands. "And he was hunting me." "Yes." Julian met her gaze. "Your bloodline is one he has sought for a very long time. It is called sanguis amnis, the river blood. It is exceptionally rare and dormant, until, it seems, last night." Ilara felt sick. "So what does that mean? What does it do?" "We are not entirely certain," Julian admitted. "The old texts are vague. They say it clarifies, that it can break blood curses, shatter glamours. Silas is damaged. Cursed, many believe. He thinks your blood is his salvation. Alara finally took a sip of coffee. It was hot. Real. So Cassian, he saved me. He did. Julian looked at her with open curiosity. Which is the part we are all struggling to understand. What do you mean? Lord Cassian has led this coven for over 500 years. He is distant. He is a creature of law, of order. He protects the coven by ensuring secrecy. He does not interact with your world. He certainly does not. Julian gestured to her wrist. Mark humans with his personal sigil of protection. Alara looked at the faint rune. A sigil? He called it a tip. A small, genuine smile touched Julian's lips. He has a dry sense of humor. That is the Primus mark, Alara. It declares you victis sub tutela, the victim under protection. In our world, it is a binding declaration. It means any who harm you, harm him. It is unprecedented. He has claimed you. Alara stiffened. Claimed me? I'm not a piece of property. No, no, Julian raised his hands. Not claimed in that way. It is a political and legal status, a declaration of sanctuary. He has, in effect, drawn a line in the sand against Silas, and against anyone else who might seek you out. So what happens now? She asked, her voice small. Do I just live in this apartment forever? That is your choice, Julian said. Lord Cassian offers 2. 1. We give you a new identity. I don't have anything to leave, Alara said bitterly. A crappy apartment, a worse car, and a delivery job. The only thing I have is a past I'm trying to outrun. Which brings us to the second, more complicated option, Julian said. You stay, here, in this building, under his direct protection. And be... what? A prisoner? A guest, Julian corrected gently. And perhaps a student. If Silas found you once, he will try again. He will not be deterred by a sigil for long. It only hides you. It doesn't protect you from a direct assault. If you stay, we can teach you. Teach you about our world. Teach you how to see them. Your particular past, he added delicately, has given you a resilience, an awareness. You are observant. We can sharpen that. Alara looked out the window. Out there was Silas. Out there was a life of running, of looking over her shoulder, just as she had done for years. In here was a 500-year-old vampire king and a world she didn't understand. Why? Alara asked. Why is he doing this? He doesn't even know me. Julian was silent for a long moment. For the first time in a century, Julian had seen something in his master's eyes other than cold duty. When he sensed you in the lobby, he also sensed Silas. But he told me he was more disturbed by the old fear on you. The human fear. He said, the human fear. He said, the monster in the car is my problem. The monster that came before him is hers, and she survived it. She is not weak. Tears pricked Alara's eyes, hot and sudden. Her ex had called her weak every day for 2 years. He said that? He did. Julian stood, gathering the coffee cups. The choice is yours. There is no rush. Take the day. But Alara, do not leave the building. Miles away, in a condemned slaughterhouse that still reeked of iron and decay, Silas slammed his fist into a concrete wall, shattering it. She's gone, he roared. The 2 human thralls cowering in the corner whimpered. He masked her, the great Primus. Silas seethed, pacing the blood-stained floor. He hid her, after years of searching, after I finally cornered her. Silas was not like Cassian. Where Cassian was cold, controlled elegance, Silas was raw, feral power. He was younger, perhaps only 2 centuries old, and he was afflicted, a creeping dark rot that spread up his left arm, a curse from an elder he had defied. It caused him constant burning pain. The sanguis amnis was his only hope. Her blood wouldn't just give him power, it would heal him. He thinks he can hide her in that glass tower, Silas snarled, his eyes flashing a dull, sick red. He thinks his little laws protect him. He stopped pacing and looked at his trembling thralls. But the Primus has not left his tower in decades. He is isolated. He has forgotten what the world is like. He has vulnerabilities. He pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number. He took the bait, Silas said into the phone. Yes, he marked her. He claimed her, just as you said he would. He listened, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Oh, yes, the great Lord Cassian, undone by a delivery girl. The council will be fascinated. You just make sure the security wards are fluctuating when I make my visit. She can't hide from me forever. He hung up and looked at his rotting arm. The pain was excruciating. Soon, he whispered. Soon. 2 days passed. Ilara stayed in 10B. Julian brought her meals, books, strangely books on art history, Renaissance architecture, and poetry. Lord Cassian's recommendations, he'd said with a wry smile. His interests are classical. She was a voracious reader. She devoured the books, losing herself in worlds of marble and canvas, worlds that felt as alien as the one she had just entered. She was healing, the constant thrum of adrenaline that had been her companion for years finally receding. She slept, deeply, for the first time she could remember. On the third night, she was summoned. Not by Julian, but by a feeling. A cold, pulling sensation in her chest, emanating from the silver rune, which pulsed faintly. It was a summons. She took the elevator, her heart thudding. She was no longer the terrified, rain-soaked girl. She was still afraid, but it was a different fear. Not panic, anticipation. The penthouse was as she remembered. Vast, dark, cold. The storm had passed, and the city glittered below like a carpet of shattered diamonds. Cassian was not by the window. He was in a recessed area she hadn't seen, a library. Walls of ancient, leather-bound books soared to the ceiling. A single green-shaded lamp cast a pool of warm light on a massive oak desk. He was reading, a pair of anachronistic spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up as she entered. He removed the glasses, and his amber eyes fixed on her. The air crackled. You stayed, he said. You gave me a choice, she replied, finding her voice. It was stronger than she expected. Julian informed me of your preference. I don't want to run anymore. He stood, and again, the silent, predatory grace. He moved from behind the desk, stopping a few feet from her. He was studying her, his gaze intense. The fear is less. The rune has settled. Good. Thank you, she said. For this, the room, the food, saving my life. It was a convergence of interests, he said dismissively. Silas is a blight. He needed to be curtailed. But you didn't have to help me. Julian said, this was unusual for you. Something flickered in his eyes. A shadow. Julian is sentimental. I am practical. Silas threatened the Covenant's secrecy by hunting in my city. You were the catalyst. Ilara nodded, though she didn't quite believe him. She was observant, as he'd noted. And she observed a man who was profoundly, achingly lonely. This library was a tomb, beautiful and dead. You called me a catalyst. Julian called me a guest. Silas called me a cure. I'd like to know what I am. A flicker of surprise. For the first time in perhaps 200 years, Cassian was confronted by a human who was not terrified, or sycophantic, or begging. You are, he tilted his head, a complication. Right, a complication. Ilara crossed her arms. So, this training, when does it start? Against his better judgment, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. It has already begun. Julian will handle the practicalities, the lore, the recognition of our kind. I, he said, will teach you something more important. What? Strategy. He gestured to a chessboard set up on a nearby table. Silas is a brute, but he is not stupid, and he is not working alone. How do you know? Because you found him, Cassian said. A delivery driver, with no connection to our world, was assigned an anonymous, impossible order that led you directly to the one place in the city he could not enter. He didn't follow you here, Alara. He lured you here. He wanted me to find you. The blood drained from Alara's face. He used me as bait to get to you? No. Cassian's eyes went cold, like winter frost. He wanted me to claim you, to make a public, political declaration. He is trying to destabilize my coven, and you, the Sanguis Amnis, are the perfect pawn. He picked up a white pawn and rolled it between his long fingers. The question is, who inside my own walls is helping him? Something cold twisted in Alara's chest. This was bigger than a stalker. She was in the middle of a war. Your move, Alara, Cassian said, gesturing to the board. The training began the next day. The next few weeks fell into a strange, surreal routine. By day, Alara worked with Julian in the vast, ancient library. He was a patient teacher. He taught her the history of the coven, the ancient laws, the different bloodlines and their abilities. He taught her to see past the glamours vampires use to blend in. Subtle tricks of light and perception that made them seem unassuming. We are not monsters, Julian explained, sipping tea while Alara took notes. Not inherently. We are predators, yes, but with order, with rules. The coven maintains the veil. We live alongside you, unseen. Most of us feed from curated willing donors. It is symbiotic. But Silas is what happens when the hunger mixes with a damaged soul. He is a throwback, a cautionary tale. Alara's observational skills, honed by years of walking on eggshells around her volatile ex, made her a quick study. She learned to spot the stillness in a vampire's posture, the lack of a breath fog in cold air, the subtle, predatory focus in their gaze when they looked at the human herd. By night, she met with Cassian. Their sessions were silent, intense battles of will over the chessboard. He was a master, of course, but he wasn't teaching her to win. He was teaching her to think. You look at the board, but you do not see it, he'd murmur, as she lost her queen. You see the pieces. You do not see the spaces in between. You see the immediate threat. You do not see the echo it will create 3 moves from now. He was relentless, but not cruel. He pushed her. He forced her to anticipate, to see the hidden patterns. And as they played, they talked. Or rather, she talked, and he listened. She told him about her job, about her tiny apartment. She told him about her love of art history, a degree she'd abandoned when her ex had convinced her she wasn't smart enough. Cassian, in return, was reserved, but he would on occasion share something. He spoke of Renaissance Florence as if he'd been there. He critiqued her art history book, pointing out a misattributed fresco. He spoke of loneliness, not as an emotion, but as a tactic. Isolation is a shield, Alara, he said one night, his eyes on the board. It prevents weakness, prevents attachments that can be leveraged. It's also a prison, she replied quietly, moving her knight. His head snapped up. His amber eyes bored into hers. The air grew heavy, still. He stared at her for a long, silent minute, the quiet thrum of the city far below. Check, she said softly. He looked down, surprised. She had him. He hadn't been paying attention. A slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. So it is. A new dynamic was forming between them. The fragile, embryonic stirring of trust. He was, she realized, just as much a prisoner of his penthouse as she was. He was the king, but he was isolated by his own power. She was also finding her own strength. She was not the delivery girl anymore. She spoke with confidence. She walked the halls of the Obsidian with purpose. She was no longer reactive. She was becoming active. But as her trust in Cassian grew, the political maneuvering outside the penthouse was escalating. He claimed a mortal. The Athenaeum was a circular chamber deep beneath the Obsidian, carved from the bedrock of the city. It was the Coven's council chamber. Cassian sat on a high-backed basalt throne, his face an impassive mask. Julian stood to his right. Before him, the Coven Council, 5 ancient vampires, were in uproar. "It is a mockery, Cassian," shouted Marcus, supporting character, traitor, antagonist. Marcus was old, far older than Julian, with a politician's smile and eyes like chips of ice. He was Cassian's chief rival. "You bring a stray, a sanguis amnis no less, into our sanctuary? You mark her? You endanger us all for a pet?" "She is victis sub tutela." Cassian's voice cut through the noise, silencing the room. The claim. "The ancient law is clear. I have offered sanctuary to one hunted by an aberration. She is under my protection. An attack on her is an attack on the Primus. Are you challenging the law, Marcus?" The room went cold. Marcus held Cassian's gaze, his lip curling. "I am questioning your judgment, not the law. Silas has been a ghost for 50 years. Suddenly he appears, and you shatter centuries of tradition for a human girl? It shows weakness, distraction. The Coven sees it. They are concerned." "My judgment is my own," Cassian said. "Silas is the threat. He is the one we should be hunting, not the girl." "And how do you propose we hunt him?" Marcus countered. "He is invisible. Unless you use the girl as bait." Cassian's hands gripped the arms of his throne. The stone groaned. "The girl is not bait. She is under my protection. You will all respect the sigil. Silas will be found. This council is concluded." He rose, a silent dismissal. The other council members bowed, but Marcus smiled. It was a smile of cold, calculating victory. He had planted the seed of doubt. As Cassian swept from the room, Julian following, Marcus lingered. He pulled a burner phone from his pocket. He sent a single text. "He's isolated. The council is turning. He's protecting her personally. The penthouse. Soon." "He's right, isn't he?" Ilara asked. She was standing with Julian in his research office, a smaller, cozier version of Cassian's library. They had been poring over ancient, crumbling maps of the city, looking for Coven energy signatures, trying to find Silas's hideout. "Is who right?" Julian asked, not looking up. "Marcus, the councilman. You told me what he said. They think I'm a weakness. That Cassian should use me as bait." Julian sighed, rubbing his temples. "Marcus is a politician, Ilara. He smells blood in the water. Cassian's interest in you is a political liability. Marcus wants Cassian's seat. He'll use any leverage he can. So I am a liability. You are a person, Ilara," Julian said firmly. "And Cassian's choice. He has not intervened like this since, well, a very long time. He sees something in you, a strength." Ilara looked at the maps. "If Silas is being helped by someone on the inside, as Cassian suspects, we're not just looking for a monster. We're looking for a traitor." "Indeed." Ilara leaned over the map. Her observational training kicked in. She wasn't just looking at the dots. She was looking at the spaces in between. "You've been tracking Silas's energy flare-ups, right? Where he's fed or used power." "Yes. They're random, all over the industrial sector. No pattern." "No," Ilara said, her finger tracing a line. They're not random. Look, this one, this one, this one. They're all within 2 blocks of a major power conduit. And this one, it's near a water main. And this one, she tapped a spot on the docks. A sewage treatment plant. He's not just hiding. He's hiding his scent. Julian stared. My God, he's using the city's infrastructure to mask his movements. The ozone from the power lines, the chemicals from the water. He's smarter than we thought. He's not just smarter, Ilara whispered, a cold dread filling her. He's being informed. Who knows the city's coven grid and its human infrastructure? Julian's face went pale. Only the coven's curator, the one responsible for maintaining the veil, for managing our assets within the human government. Who is it? Ilara asked. It's Marcus. The betrayal. It landed like a physical blow. It wasn't just political maneuvering. It was treason. Marcus wasn't just trying to oust Cassian. He was actively helping Silas to create the chaos he needed for a coup. We have to tell Cassian. At that exact moment, a security alert blared through the building. A shrill, piercing alarm. Julian's head snapped toward his monitor. Breach! The Athenaeum! Marcus has triggered a containment failure. A diversion, Ilara said, her voice shaking but steady. Julian looked at another screen. Oh God. Ilara. The penthouse wards. They're down. He's here, she whispered. The elevator, Julian commanded. Go, now, get to Cassian. He's in the library. Ilara ran. She burst from Julian's office into the main hall, slamming the elevator button. The alarm was deafening. The building's lights flashed red. The elevator doors opened. She scrambled in, hitting the PH-01 button. The doors closed, and the box began its silent, terrifying ascent. She was shaking, but it wasn't the paralyzing fear of the delivery night. This was adrenaline. This was a soldier's fear. The doors hissed open to the penthouse. The room was a war zone. The massive glass windows were shattered, the storm outside howling into the room, sending books and papers flying. Silas was there. He was no longer the man in the coat. He was a monster. His glamour was gone. His eyes were burning red, his face contorted in a feral snarl, his left arm a blackened, rotting claw. He was fighting Cassian. It was a battle of gods. They moved like blurs, key phrase, impacts shattering the marble floor. Cassian was fluid, precise, ancient power held in check. Silas was chaos, all feral strength and screaming rage. You hit her! Silas roared, lunging with his corrupted claws. Cassian caught his arm, the sound of impact like a car crash. You allied with Marcus. You broke the covenant, you fool. He promised me her blood. He promised me your throne. Silas was strong, fueled by madness, and the aged coven blood Marcus had surely given him. He slammed Cassian through the oak desk, shattering it into splinters. Ilara screamed. Silas froze. He turned. He had forgotten her. He saw her by the elevator, and his red eyes lit with a terrible, greedy hunger. The sanguis amnis, he hissed, forgetting Cassian. You came right to me. He started toward her, a predator stalking his prey. Ilara backed against the elevator wall, her heart hammering. She looked around. No weapon. No escape. See the spaces in between. Cassian's voice. She looked at Silas. He was monologuing, savoring the moment. Your blood will burn this curse from me. I will be whole. She looked at him. Not as a monster, as a target. He was favoring his right side. His rotten left arm, though strong, was slow. He was protecting a spot under his ribs, an old wound. As he lunged, Ilara didn't scream. She moved. She didn't run. She sidestepped, grabbing the heavy bronze base of the shattered desk lamp. You're in pain, she said, her voice clear. Silas stopped, confused by her lack of fear. What? That's why you want my blood. You're not just cursed. You're in agony. She was observant. She was brave. "Insolent child!" he roared and lunged again. She swung the lamp base, not at his head, but at his right knee. There was a sickening crack. Silas howled, his leg buckling. It wouldn't stop him, but it bought a second. "Alara, run!" Cassian shouted, pulling himself from the wreckage of his desk. But Silas was too fast. He ignored the pain and scrambled, grabbing Alara by the throat, lifting her off the ground. Her feet kicked uselessly. Black spots danced in her vision. He held her aloft, a trophy. "It's over, Primus. Give me the throne or she dies and I take her blood anyway." Cassian froze. He was 10 feet away. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his black sweater shredded. He looked at Alara, her face turning blue. He looked at Silas, triumphant and insane. He could kill Silas, in a heartbeat. But the shockwave of his power, unleashed so close, would kill Alara too. He was trapped. The air in the room went utterly still. Key phrase. The storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Cassian slowly, deliberately straightened his posture. He wiped the black blood from his lip. He looked at Alara, and in his eyes, she saw an emotion she had never seen there. Regret. "Let her go, Silas," Cassian said, his voice quiet, calm. "No more games, old man. Let her go." Cassian took a step forward, his hands open, palms up. "And you will have what you came for, a cure." Silas paused, his grip on Alara's throat loosening just enough for her to gasp. "What? You think her blood is the prize?" Cassian said, taking another step. "Her blood is an echo, a dormant human echo of true power. You want to break your curse? You want to be whole?" Cassian stopped, standing completely vulnerable, 5 feet from the monster. "Take mine." Silas stared, his madness giving way to confusion. "A trick?" "No trick." Cassian tilted his head, exposing the pale, flawless line of his throat. "The blood of a Primus, the blood of the first of this city. It will either burn your curse away in an instant, or it will destroy you utterly. A finer gamble than hers, is it not?" Alara's eyes widened. He was sacrificing himself. For her, Silas was shaking. The temptation was too much. The power radiating from Cassian, freely offered, was a siren song. To drink the blood of an ancient. Greed won. With a roar, Silas threw Alara aside. She crumpled to the floor, gasping. He lunged at Cassian, his fangs distended, and buried his face in his king's throat. A terrible, ecstatic sound gurgled from Silas's chest. Cassian's eyes snapped open. They were not amber. They were solid, burning gold. "You chose," he whispered, poorly. His hand, which had been resting on his broken desk, was not empty. It held a long, jagged shard of volcanic glass, an obsidian letter opener she had seen him admire. With a movement too fast for the human eye to track, he drove the obsidian dagger upward, under Silas's ribs, directly into the old wound Alara had spotted. He plunged it straight into the vampire's unbeating heart. Silas's eyes went wide. He choked. He looked down at the dagger, then up at Cassian. Cassian did not let go. He held Silas's gaze as the rogue vampire began to crumble, to disintegrate. "The curse was not in your arm, Silas," Cassian said, his voice cold as the grave. "It was in your soul." Silas opened his mouth, but only dust came out. He dissolved, a cascade of ancient ash and rotting cloth, until nothing was left but the obsidian dagger, which clattered to the floor. The room was silent, save for the wind and Alara's ragged gasps. Cassian stood for a long moment, the wound in his neck weeping black, slow blood. He did not look at the pile of ash. He turned to Alara. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside her, his face a mask of restrained, violent emotion. He touched her cheek, his hand trembling slightly. "Are you harmed?" he asked, his voice rough. She just stared at him, at the man who had just offered his life for hers. Her heart, which had hammered in terror, now hammered with something else entirely. something new. You bled for me, she whispered. He seemed lost for words. For the first time in 500 years, Cassian, the Primus, the Isolate, the King, was truly, completely seen. He gently touched the rune on her wrist. It was glowing, silver and bright, pulsing in time with her own heart. Alara's words hung in the sudden, echoing silence. You bled for me. Cassian knelt, the wind tearing at his shredded clothes, his black blood still weeping from the savage wound on his neck. He looked at her, his ancient, amber eyes stripped bare of all artifice, all control. He saw her, crumpled on the floor, not in terror of him, but in shock for him. Something twisted in his chest, a painful, unfamiliar sensation. It was not the cold ache of solitude. It was the sharp, hot splinter of connection. He began, his voice rough. For the first time in 300 years, the Primus of the Coven had no words. He had calculated the gamble with Silas. He had calculated the political fallout with Marcus. He had not in all his centuries calculated this human, who he had brought in to protect, looking at him as if he were the one who had been saved. Alara's survival instincts, honed by years of crisis, took over. The terror receded, replaced by a strange, sharp focus. He was hurt. The monster was gone, but the man was bleeding. She scrambled to her feet, her body aching. You're hurt. It is nothing. It will heal. It doesn't look like nothing. She looked around the ruined library. Her eyes landed on a bolt of velvet upholstery fabric, torn from a shattered chair. She ripped a clean strip from it. She stepped toward him. Cassian flinched. Not a large movement, but an involuntary tensing of his entire frame. He was the apex predator. Nothing approached him when he was wounded. He had expected her to run, to cower, to hide. She did not. She walked directly to him, her eyes fixed on the wound. Hold still, she commanded, her voice soft but firm. She reached up, her hand trembling, and pressed the wadded velvet against the side of his neck. The moment her fingers brushed his skin, Cassian's breath hitched. Her hand was so warm. The simple human touch was a shock, a jolt more profound than Silas's attack. It was an act of care, an act of trust. She was not afraid of the blood. She was not afraid of him. He stood, frozen, a 500-year-old warlord and king, rendered utterly still by the gentle pressure of a mortal's hand. You should have run, he whispered, his gaze locked on her face. You told me to stop running, she whispered back, her eyes meeting his. She saw the raw vulnerability there, the ancient loneliness he shielded from his world. You saved me. You offered yourself. He was going to kill you. Cassian said it simply, as if stating a law of physics. I could not permit that. Why? Her voice was barely audible over the howl of the wind. Why, Cassian? I'm just a complication. His hand came up, his long, cold fingers covering hers, pressing her hand more firmly against his neck. The gesture was possessive, protective, and desperate all at once. You are not a complication, Alara, he said, his voice dropping. You are inconvenient. You are observant. You are brave. And he searched for the word. You see the spaces in between. I had forgotten they existed. The air between them was electric, intimate, a bubble of impossible quiet in the center of the devastation. The centuries-old barriers around Cassian's soul, the ones he'd built of isolation and duty, were cracking. The hiss of the elevator door broke the spell. Julian rushed in, a Coven security team in black armor behind him. He stopped dead, taking in the scene. The shattered windows, the pile of ashen dust that was Silas, and his lord, standing stock still, allowing a human woman to tend a bleeding wound on his throat. Julian's jaw dropped. My lord. Cassian did not look at him. He did not break his gaze from Alara's. Julian, he said, his voice regaining its command. Secure the penthouse. Send a cleanup crew. And summon the entire council. Now. To the Athenaeum. He gently removed his hand from Alara's. She stepped back, the dark velvet in her hand. Ilara, he said, his voice formal once more, but with a new, rough edge of emotion. You will come with me. She looked down at the blood on her hands, then at him. Where? To the trial. Cassian turned, his shoulders set. The king was back, but he was not the same king who had entered the room. You are the prosecution, and I, he said, touching the raw, red-edged wound on his neck, am the evidence. Marcus was there, seated at the head of the council, his face a perfect mask of concerned, grave authority. He had already spun the narrative. The alarm, the breach, a terrible tragedy. Silas the rogue had finally made his move. He looked at Cassian with practiced sympathy. Lord Primus, Marcus began, his voice dripping with false concern. To see you, wounded. It is a dark day. You were right to call us. We must hunt Silas down before he... Silas is dust. Cassian's voice cut through the room like a blade. The chamber went utterly silent. Marcus's composure fractured for a split second, a flicker of disbelief. What? How? He overplayed his hand. Cassian ascended the dais, but he did not sit on his throne. He stood beside it, a king addressing his court. Julian stood to his right, and to his left, her head held high, was Alara. A murmur swept the room. A human, in the sacred Athenaeum. Marcus found his footing. Primus, this is an outrage. After this security breach, you bring the source of the instability into our most sacred. She is the witness to the instability, Marcus, Cassian said, his voice a low growl. A witness? A human? Marcus scoffed. What could she possibly? She is sanguis amnis, Cassian countered. Her blood clarifies. It reveals. And she, he gestured to Alara, has revealed the rot in this coven. Alara stepped forward. She was terrified, her heart hammering, but she was not the girl from the delivery car. She was a survivor. She was a strategist. She met Marcus's icy gaze. Silas didn't find me by accident, Alara said, her voice clear and steady, echoing in the stone hall. He was told where to find me. He was lured to the one place he couldn't get in, to bait Lord Cassian into claiming me. Absurd, Marcus snapped. The ramblings of a... He was told, Ilara continued louder, by someone who knew Coven energy grids and human city infrastructure. Someone who knew Silas was tracking my bloodline. Someone who knew Silas was hiding his movements using power conduits and water mains. She nodded to Julian. He pressed a rune on a tablet. A holographic image flared to life in the center of the room. The city map, with Alara's annotated lines, the ones she had shown Julian. A pattern, Alara said, that only one member of this coven had the knowledge to exploit. The coven curator. Marcus's face went pale. You, Alara said, pointing a steady finger at him. You are the traitor. The hall exploded. The council members were on their feet. Treason! Blasphemy! Marcus laughed, a high, cold sound. You would believe this, pet, over me? Marcus, who has served this coven for 4 centuries. She has no proof, only a map. It is her word against mine. No, Julian said quietly, stepping forward. Not just her word. He pressed another rune. When you triggered the containment failure in this chamber, you used your personal command codes. When the penthouse wards dropped, they did so via a remote signal. A new image appeared. A call log. A burner phone, routing through 3 countries, signaling the wards to drop at the exact moment of the Athenaeum breach. We tracked the phone, Julian said. It is currently in the breast pocket of your jacket, Marcus. Marcus froze. His mask of civility melted, revealing the snarling ambition beneath. He is weak, he roared, pointing at Cassian. He bleeds for her. He has allowed a human to befoul this coven, to cloud his mind. He isolates himself. He stagnates. He bled for her. Is that your king? A fool who would die for a mortal? He had cornered himself. He knew it. In a final, desperate act of chaos, he lunged. But he didn't lunge at Cassian. He lunged at Alara. She is the poison. I will cleanse this coven myself. He was ancient. He was fast. He was not as fast as Cassian. Cassian moved like a shadow. He didn't erupt in violence. He simply was. One moment he was by the throne. The next he was between Marcus and Alara, his hand clamped around Marcus's throat, lifting the traitor clean off his feet. There was no sound. Just the sickening creak of ancient bone under pressure. True power, Cassian whispered, his voice dangerously soft, his amber eyes burning with a cold, contained fury, is choosing restraint. But I am flexible. He held Marcus suspended, the traitor's legs kicking uselessly. The coven watched, silent, terrified, and awestruck. The sleeping king was awake. You sought to use my isolation against me, Cassian said. You were right. I was isolated. I was stagnant. But you are simply a fool. He did not kill him. He released his throat, and Marcus crumpled to the ground, choking. Marcus, Cassian pronounced, his voice ringing with the authority of the Primus. You are stripped of your name, your title, and your coven. You are excommunicatus. The sun rises in 4 hours. The coven guards will escort you to the surface. What happens next is between you and your god. He had banished him. A death sentence, served by the dawn. 2 guards seized the trembling, defeated vampire and dragged him from the hall. The confrontation was over. The Athenaeum was silent. The remaining 4 council members stared at Cassian, their fear palpable. Cassian turned to face them. He was pale, the effort of the confrontation and his unhealed wound taxing him. He was, for the first time, showing his council his vulnerability. Marcus was right about one thing, Cassian said, his voice echoing in the quiet. I have changed. For 500 years I have led this coven from a glass tower. I believed isolation was strength. I believed detachment was law. I was wrong. He looked at Alara, who stood, shaken but resolute, beside him. I was blind, he said, his gaze fixed on hers. And she was my eyes. She saw the pattern we were too arrogant to look for. She saw the truth. She, a mortal, with no power but her own courage and her own mind, has saved this coven from a rot that I allowed to fester in my own absence. He turned back to the council. This cannot happen again. The world changes, and we have not changed with it. We have hidden in the shadows, and our shadows have bred traitors. He took a breath, a decision forming, a systemic transformation. Alara, he said, is sanguis amnis. Her bloodline is one of connection, of clarity. Our coven needs clarity. It needs connection to the world we live in, to the humanity we have forgotten. He made a proclamation. The victus sub tutela is revoked. Alara's heart sank. She thought. In its place, Cassian continued, his voice resonating with power, I am creating a new position. Consor's coven, counsel to the coven, an advisor drawn from the mortal world to act as a bridge, to be our eyes, to see what we cannot. He looked at Alara. It was not a command. It was a question. She saw her future. It was not running. It was not hiding in 10B. It was not being a pet. It was a choice. It was agency. She stepped forward and faced the council. I accept. The council stared, stunned at the unprecedented shift in power. But they had seen Marcus's treason. They had seen Cassian's sacrifice. And they saw the quiet, unshakable strength of the woman beside him. One by one, they bowed. Not to her, not just to Cassian, but to the idea, to the future. Weeks passed. The city eased into the gold and chill of late autumn. The penthouse, once a stark and empty tomb, was changing. The shattered windows had been replaced with reinforced, invisible smart glass. But now, they were often left open, letting the sounds of the city drift in. There were rugs on the floor. There were flowers in a vase on a side table. Alara was curled on a deep blue velvet sofa in the library, a sofa that hadn't been there a month ago. She was not reading art history. She was poring over Coven ledgers, her laptop open beside her, cross-referencing Coven assets with modern stock portfolios. She had moved out of 10B. She had her own suite of rooms, adjoining the library. The hiss of an elevator. Alara looked up. Cassian entered. He was not in his severe black Primus attire. He wore dark trousers and a soft gray cashmere sweater. He looked comfortable. He looked for the first in 500 years at home. He was carrying a tray. On it were 2 steaming cups of tea. "You have been at this for hours," he said, his voice a low rumble. He set the tray on the coffee table. "Even a counsel to the Coven must rest." "Julian is worried about the shipping investments," she said, stretching. "Marcus ran them like his own personal slush fund. We're bleeding money." "We will fix it." He sat, not in a separate chair, but on the other end of the sofa, a comfortable, companionable distance. "You have, in 3 weeks, reorganized a century of disorganized finance. You have also brought life back to this place." Alara smiled, taking the tea. It was her favorite, an obscure herbal blend. He had remembered. "It's not just me. Julian is relieved to finally have someone to talk strategy with." "He is. He finds you refreshingly pragmatic." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the turning of a page as Alara made a note. It was a peaceful domestic quiet. "The scar," Alara said softly, looking at his throat. The wound had healed, but it had not vanished. It remained a faint silver-white line, like a new moon crescent. It looked almost exactly like the rune on her own wrist. He touched it. A reminder. Of what? That isolation is not strength. He looked at her, his amber eyes warm in the lamplight. And that some complications are necessary. She looked down at her hand, where the silver rune on her wrist was now a faint, permanent part of her skin. "We match." He reached across the sofa, his fingers gently brushing the mark. His skin was not cold. It was just him. "So we do." Their relationship was not a whirlwind romance. It was something deeper, quieter. It was the slow, steady build of a bridge across an impossible divide. It was the trust of 2 survivors, one of an ancient, self-imposed prison, the other of a brutal human one. Against his better judgment, Cassian was, for the first time, learning not just to lead, but to share. He was learning to feel again, 6 months later. The Athenaeum was, once again, in session, but the atmosphere was not one of fear or stagnation. It was energized. Alara stood at the central dais, Cassian's throne at her side, but he was not on it. He stood with her, an equal partner, as she addressed the Coven. She wore a sharp, dark business suit, her hair tied back. She was no longer a victim. She was a leader. By cross-referencing the city's new fiber optic light detection grid with our own glamour frequency monitors, Alara explained, pointing to a complex, glowing schematic, we can now identify and intercept aberrations before they make a public breach. We are no longer just hiding, we are integrating. Julian's team has already used this to stop 2 fledgling rogues in the financial district. The Coven members, no longer just old, stagnant ancients, but younger, more tech-savvy vampires Alara had helped recruit, were nodding, taking notes. She had transformed their medieval society into a modern intelligence agency. Julian, watching from the side, smiled. Later that night, the penthouse. Alara and Cassian stood on the balcony, the city glittering below them, a sea of infinite human light. The night air was cool, but not cold. Alara looked down at her wrist. The rune was just a faint, silver memory, a reminder of the 3 a.m. delivery that had ended her life and begun it. Cassian watched her, not the city. He had spent centuries watching his territory. Now, he only had eyes for the woman who had breached his walls and saved his soul. "You were right, you know," he said quietly. She turned to him, smiling. "About the shipping investments? About the prison?" He gestured to the vast open-air view. "I built this place as a fortress, to keep the world out. It was just a prettier cage." "And now?" she asked. He looked at her, and his eyes, once like frozen amber, were warm. He reached for her hand. "Now," Cassian said, his fingers lacing with hers, "it's home."